The effects panel you may or may not want to use. So if I come over here, you can see that the effects panel has, well, it's got an upgrade, at least one upgrade from anything that you've probably worked with in the past. This originally started off with a clarity slider. Then Adobe added the Dehaze slider. They're micro contrast enhancement sliders. The contrast that we had in the light panel was a global contrast adjustment. Now this is a local cluster kind of a contrast enhancement. And they all do something a little bit different. So as an example, if your image looks a little bit soft for one reason or another, add a little clarity, right? So one of the things that I do is when I'm shooting hockey, depending on the arena I'm in, sometimes I have to shoot through the plexiglass as opposed to shooting through the little cutout, the portal, for the photographer's lens to go through. If I find that I'm shooting through the plexiglass, I know my images are going to be a little soft. So I know that all the images that I am going to edit are going to require a little bit of clarity and a little bit of dehaze. Each arena is going to be a little bit different, but for the most part, I can create a preset and apply that to all my images right at once. So when I do get in here and start looking at my images, they've already got it applied. We'll get into that a little bit later on. Texture, again, is going to bring out some texture. So down here where we have a lot of high frequency stuff going on, a lot of lines and everything else, that's texture. This slider will affect that. And if I move the slider to the right, it'll enhance. And if I move it to the left, it will reduce. And it's basically working in what we call high frequency areas. This part of the leaf up here is what we would call a low frequency. Not a lot of edges. Lots of little edges. All right. And then we'll have a vignette. And we know what vignette's all about, darkening the corners. Well, that's what a lot of people do, is they darken the corners to bring the viewer's attention to the center of the image. I'm a little this and that with vignette. We'll get into that a little bit later on. And then we've got some grain. And I know. We shoot our images and then we have such amazing noise removal software. Why would we want to put the equivalent to grain back into our images? And we'll leave that for the grain section. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to zoom in on my image, and I want to get this to be 100% view. Notice what cursor I have. Which one do I have? I have this guy. So I need to come back over here and click on that. Notice that the box around there is dark. If I click on that, it's not dark anymore. I bring my cursor back. It's back to the zoom tool. So now if I hold down the space bar, I can now click and drag and come over here and take a look at this. All right, so I'm just going to close that because we don't want that as a distraction. Let's move the texture slider to the right and we'll see what happens over here. You see how all the texture seems to be enhanced, and if I go this way, it seems to be softened way too much. So let's come over here, and I don't know how much I want to put in there, so I'm just going to go shift up 10, 20. Yeah, that should be fine for now. Oh, look at the little ant over there. All right. Oh, and a little spot here. This is going to be great for when we come over here to the editing little artifacts out of our image. That's fantastic. So now if I come over here and click on this, and I'm wondering, yeah, all the areas where there's lots of close edges everywhere is being affected by that. Now, if I come over here and grab the clarity slider, right, I can increase, but when I'm doing that, I want you to take a look at the histogram a little bit. As I increase the clarity, notice that I'm lightening the lights and I'm darkening the darks, and that's kind of obvious when we come back here, and yeah, you can see that there's a lot of clarity stuff going on. I think plus 70 is way too much. So let's go down. Come on. So let's go down to about plus 30 maybe. And then we come in here to dehaze. Dehaze is mostly, well, it was originally put in there because there was a lot of landscape photographers then shooting high mountains, and there was a lot of atmospheric haze, and this was an answer to that. So let's see what that does. And if I increase it this way, oh yeah, you see how again, it's a contrast enhancer. So we might want to bring this up by 10, but that's about it as far as I'm concerned. Now, remember this guy here is at 30, and I want to show you negative clarity. Right? Negative clarity softens your image, gives it a bit of a etheric glow, if you will. I'm going back to 30. Now, the reason why I am bringing this up is a lot of people will, when they shoot their brides, they will come into the clarity slider and give it a negative clarity on their images. And I'm going to have to say that there are much, much better ways to go about creating that illusion than using negative clarity, only because it affects everything. Now, I have seen some images that really benefit from having negative clarity, but not too much negative clarity. I remember one student of mine had brought into class some of his prints. You know, his stuff was really, really good. And I encouraged him to print up a book, you know, like a coffee table book. And he did. And he brought it into class. And I looked at this one shot. He converted to black and white. It was a foggy morning shot on the boardwalk. I think it was down at Coney Island. And he had negative clarity in there, and it just looked fantastic. He didn't overdo it. He didn't first, but, you know, I kind of told him off about what he was doing and whatever. Everybody has to go through that learning process. Anyways, now that we've got these guys out of the way, and let's just click on this to see what the difference is. Oh, that's nice. I'm liking that. Yeah, that's nice. Okay,